Continuation of The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Chapter 16. Erasing the Crime. At 9 o'clock the next morning, Dorian's servant came in with a cup of hot chocolate and opened the shutters. The man had to touch him twice on the shoulder before he woke up. Dorian was sleeping quite peacefully. He looked like a little boy who had been tired out by healthy play. He turned around and, leaning on his elbow, sipped his chocolate. The mellow November sun came streaming into the room. The sky was bright, and there was a warmth in the air. It was almost like a morning in May. But gradually the events of the previous night crept with blood-stained feet into his brain. He winced at the memory of what he had done, and was again seized by a hatred for Basil Hallward. He had killed a man, and the dead man was still in his house. After he finished his drink, he sat down at the table and wrote 2 letters. One he put in his pocket, the other he handed to his valet, and ordered him to deliver it to Mr. Alan Campbell, 152 Hertford Street. Dorian wanted Alan Campbell to come immediately to his home. Dorian passed the morning sketching and reading, but he was troubled by his thoughts. What if Alan Campbell was out of the country? Worse yet, what if he refused to see him? After all, they were no longer friends. They had been great friends once, 5 years before. Then the closeness had ended, suddenly, completely. Now, when they met in society, it was only Dorian Gray who spoke. Alan Campbell never replied. Alan was an extremely smart young man who loved science. At Cambridge, he spent a great deal of time working in his laboratory. He was an excellent musician as well, and it was music that had first brought Alan Campbell and Dorian Gray together. Whether or not a quarrel had taken place, no one ever knew, but people remarked that they scarcely spoke when they met, and Campbell seemed to leave any party when Dorian Gray was present. He had changed, too. Alan was very depressed, began to dislike music, and absorbed himself completely in his scientific research. Dorian began to pace the hallway. The suspense was unbearable. Time seemed to be crawling with feet of lead. At last the door opened. "Mr. Campbell, sir," said the valet. A sigh of relief broke from Dorian's lips. "Ask him to come in at once, Francis." Dorian felt he was himself again. He would be able to destroy the evidence quickly. Alan Campbell walked in, looking stern and rather pale. Campbell sat in a chair by the table, and Dorian sat opposite him. The 2 men's eyes met. Dorian knew what he was about to do was dreadful. "Thank you for coming, Alan." "Your note said it was a matter of life and death," said Alan. "I don't care. I came to tell you that I want nothing to do with you. I refuse to get mixed up with your life or your shameful secrets." Dorian listened quietly to Alan's angry words. He collected his thoughts and leaned forward, speaking softly. "Alan, I've murdered a man. He had more to do with my life than you realize. Alan, I need your help in destroying the body. You are a doctor," added Dorian. "You know how to get rid of it for me. You are the one man who is able to save me. I am forced to bring you into this matter. I have no option." "I have no desire to help you, Dorian," Alan declared. "Alan, you are scientific-minded. You know about chemistry and things of that nature. You have made experiments. What you have to do is destroy the body that is upstairs. Destroy it so that not a trace of it will be left," Dorian instructed. "Nobody saw this person come into the house. Indeed, at the present moment he is supposed to be in Paris. He will not be missed for months. When he is missed, there must be no trace of him found here. You, Alan, must change him and everything that belongs to him into a handful of ashes that I can scatter into the air." "You are mad, Dorian," replied Alan Campbell coolly. "Mad to imagine that I would raise a finger to help you after this monstrous confession. I will have nothing to do with that matter. I don't care what shame you endure. You deserve it. You must have something to do with it. Wait and listen to me, Alan, insisted Dorian. Murder? Dorian, is that what you have come to? I won't inform the police. It's none of my business. Besides, you are certain to be arrested. Nobody ever commits a crime without doing something stupid. But I will have nothing to do with it. Dorian listened to his former friend without expression, and then he stated in a firm manner, All I ask, Alan, is that you perform a certain scientific experiment. You go to the hospitals and dead houses, and the horrors there don't affect you. If in some hideous laboratory you found this man lying on a table with slashes all over his body, you would simply look at him as an interesting subject. You would not believe that you were doing anything wrong. What I want you to do, Alan, is merely what you have done before, and remember, it is the only piece of evidence against me. If it is discovered, I am lost, and it is sure to be discovered unless you help me. A look of pity mixed with anger came into Dorian Gray's eyes. Alan, I beg you, said Dorian, think of the position that I am in. Just before you came, I was seized with terror. Please, we were friends once. Don't speak to me of those days. They are dead, replied Alan. But, Alan, if you don't help me, I'm ruined. The authorities will hang me, Dorian shouted. This is no good begging, Dorian, Alan stated firmly. I absolutely refuse to do anything in the matter. It is insane of you to ask me. If you have gotten yourself into serious trouble, it is no concern of mine. You committed the problem. You'll have to solve it. You are sure you refuse to help me? Dorian asked one last time. I refuse, said Alan. Dorian paused for a moment and then took a piece of paper and wrote something on it. He folded it carefully and gave it to Campbell, who read it and fell back in his chair. As he read it, his face turned ghastly pale. A horrible sense of sickness came over him. Alan felt as if his heart was beating itself to death. After 2 or 3 minutes of terrible silence, Dorian spoke. I'm sorry, Alan, but you leave me no choice. If you don't help me, I will send the letter I have written to the name on that paper. It is impossible for you to refuse me now. Campbell nodded miserably. He buried his face in his hands, and a shudder passed through him. He knew that he had no choice. If he refused Dorian Gray, it meant ruin for himself. Yes, it is my turn to dictate terms, Alan. You know what they are. Just do what I ask. Dorian placed his hand on Alan's shoulder, and the weight seemed to crush him. Admitting defeat, he asked Dorian to contact his assistant and to secure the necessary tools. Once they arrived, Dorian escorted him upstairs to the playroom. Dorian opened the door and saw the face of his portrait in the sunlight. He remembered that the night before he had forgotten, for the first time in his life, to hide the fatal canvas. How horrible it was! What was that red dew that glistened on one of his hands? Had the canvas sweated blood? Without looking further, Dorian grabbed the torn cover and flung it over the possessed painting. Leave me alone, ordered Alan. It will take several hours. By dinner time, Alan returned downstairs. I have done what you have asked, he said bitterly. Now I never want to see you again. Chapter 17. Revenge. A cold rain began to fall, and the blurred street lamps looked eerie in the dripping mist. The moon hung low in the sky like a yellow skull. Dorian wanted only to forget the past few hours. Dorian Gray hailed a cab and told the driver to take him to the docks. He screamed at the man to drive faster and faster. On the way they passed public houses that were just closing, and men and women who were clustering in broken groups around their doors. From one of the bars came sounds of horrible laughter. In others, drunken brawls and screams. Lying back in the hansom cab, with his hat pulled over his forehead, Dorian Gray watched with dull eyes the sordid shame of London. He repeated to himself the words that Lord Henry had said to him on that fateful day when they met in Basil's studio. To cure the soul by means of the senses, and the senses by means of the soul. Yes, that, Dorian, was the secret. There were opium dens where one could buy oblivion. Yes, that was the answer. He had done it before and would do it again. The hideous hunger for opium seized him. Suddenly the driver drew up the horses with a jerk at the top of a dark lane. Over the low roofs and jagged chimney stacks of houses rose the black mass of ships. A wreath of white mist clung like ghostly sails to the shipyards. "Somewhere about here, sir, ain't it?" the driver asked. Dorian started and peered round. "This will do," he answered hurriedly, and gave the man the extra shillings he had promised him. He quickly walked in the direction of the docks. Here and there a lantern gleamed. The light shook, and a red glare flickered from outward bound coal steamers. The slimy pavement looked eerie and dangerous. Dorian Gray hurried towards the left, glancing back now and then to see if he was being followed. In about 7 or 8 minutes he reached the small, shabby place that housed the opium den. He stopped and gave the secret knock that admitted him. In one corner a sailor sprawled over a table. At the bar 2 women were drinking. At the far end of the room there was a little staircase leading to a dark and musty chamber. As Dorian hurried up its 3 steps, the heavy odor of opium met him. He heaved a deep breath, and his nostrils quivered with anticipation. Then Dorian entered. A young man with blond hair, who was bending over a lamp, lighting a long, thin pipe, looked up at him and nodded. He was thin, wasted, with a look of doom about him. "I didn't realize you would be here, Adrian," muttered Dorian. "Where else would I be?" he answered listlessly. "None of my friends will speak to me now." "I thought you had left England," said Dorian. "Darlington is not going to do anything. My brother paid the bill at last. I don't care about anything any more." Adrian sighed. "As long as I have opium, I don't need any friends." Dorian Gray winced and looked at the other people on the floor. They were laying on the ragged mattresses in grotesque, strange positions. The twisted limbs, the gaping mouths, the staring eyes made them look like creatures from another world. But Dorian knew what they felt, and what had driven them to this terrible place to escape their own thoughts and deeds. Memory was eating away at him. He kept seeing the eyes of Basil Hallward looking at him. He needed opium to forget, yet something bothered him. The presence of Adrian Shingleton in the corner, a man Basil had accused him of destroying, troubled him. He wanted to be where no one knew who he was. He wanted to escape from himself. Not wanting to stay, Dorian turned around and walked to the door with a look of pain on his face. A hideous laugh broke from the painted lips of one of the women. "Prince Charming, are you leaving us?" she chuckled as he departed. "Don't call me that," he answered. She snapped her fingers. "Prince Charming is what you used to be called, ain't it?" she yelled after him in a high, pierced shriek. The drowsy sailor leapt to his feet as she spoke and looked round wildly. He rushed out in hot pursuit. Dorian Gray hurried along through the drizzling rain. He wondered if the ruin of Shingleton's life was his fault, as Basil had said. What did Adrian matter to him? His life, his ruin, was none of Dorian's concern. Callous and concentrated on evil, Dorian quickened his pace, hoping to enter another opium den. He rushed out in hot pursuit. Dorian Gray hurried along through the drizzling rain. He wondered if the ruin of Shingleton's life was his fault, as Basil had said. What did Adrian matter to him? His life, his ruin, was none of Dorian's concern. Callous and concentrated on evil, Dorian quickened his pace, hoping to enter another opium den. He darted into a dim archway, a shortcut to the degrading place, when suddenly he was seized from behind. Before he had time to defend himself, he was thrust against the wall with brutal hand round his throat. In a second he heard the click of a revolver, saw the gleam of a gun point straight at his head, and the dusky form of a short, muscular man facing him. "What do you want?" Dorian gasped. "What have I done to you?" "Keep quiet," said the man. "If you move, I'll shoot you. You wrecked the life of Sybil Vane, my sister," he charged. "I swore I would kill you in return. I had no clue, no trace. I knew only your pet name, Prince Charming. I heard it tonight. Make your peace with God, for you're about to die." Dorian grew sick with fear. "I never knew her," he pleaded. "I never heard of her. You're mad." "You had better confess your sin, for as sure as I am James Vane, you're gonna die. Down on your knees," he commanded. "I give you 1 minute to make your peace, no more. I board a ship for India tonight, and I must do this first." Dorian was paralyzed with terror. He did not know what to say or do when suddenly a wild hope flashed across his brain. "Stop!" Dorian cried. "How long ago did your sister die? Quick, tell me." 18 years, replied James Vane. "Why do you ask me? What do the years matter?" 18 years, laughed Dorian, with a touch of triumph in his voice. "See me under the light, and look closely at my face." James Vane hesitated, and then he seized Dorian and dragged him into the light. As dim as the wind-blown lantern was, it showed him the error he was about to make. This man could not be more than 20. He had all the bloom of boyhood. Indeed, he seemed hardly older than his sister had been at the time of her death. He was not the man who had destroyed his sister's life. James Vane felt that he had almost killed the wrong person. He loosened his hand on Dorian Gray and reeled back. "I almost murdered you," he cried. "Forgive me. A chance word in that opium den set me on the wrong track." He released Dorian, who hurried away. James Vane stood on the pavement in horror. After a little while a black shadow crept out. "Why didn't you kill him?" hissed the decrepit woman who had been at the bar. "I knew you were following him when you rushed out. You should have killed him. He has lots of money, and is as bad can be." "I want no man's money. I want a man's life. He's not the man I'm looking for. My man would be nearly 40 by now. That one is little more than a boy." The woman gave a bitter laugh. "A boy! Why, it's 18 years since Prince Charming made me what I am. They say he sold himself to the devil for a pretty face. He hasn't changed in 18 years, she added with a sickly leer. "You lie," cried James Vane. She raised her hand up to heaven. "Before God, I'm telling you the truth. He's the worst one who comes here." James Vane rushed into the street to find Dorian Gray, but he was gone. When he looked back, the woman had also vanished. Chapter 18. A Second Murder. A week later, Dorian Gray was sitting in the conservatory of Shelby Royal, his country house, talking to the pretty Duchess of Monmouth, who, with her husband, a weary-looking man of 60, were among his 12 guests. Relieved he had eluded the violent James Vane, he held a lavish dinner party on his estate. There was a wild recklessness in his manner. He was entertaining his friends with clever stories when he caught a face pressed against the window. He began to tremble as he caught his breath. James Vane was there, and watching him. The next day he did not leave the house. He spent most of the time in his room, sick with fear of dying. The sense of being hunted and tracked down began to dominate him. Whenever he closed his eyes, he could see the sailor's angry face peering at him through the misty glass. but perhaps he had been only dreaming. Sybil Vane's brother had not come back to kill him. He had sailed away on a ship to India, and after all, the man did not know who he was. The mask of youth had saved him, even if it had been an illusion. How terrible to be haunted by ghosts! What sort of a life would he have, always tortured by his past crimes? Why had he killed Basil? Why had he given in to that moment of madness? He relived the murder over and over, and saw each hideous detail of his crime. Finally he calmed down. He convinced himself that he had been the victim of an overactive imagination. After 3 days of staying in his house, imprisoned by his fears, he organized a hunting party for his guests and ventured out to the pine woods. The freshly scented air that winter morning seemed to bring him back to life. After breakfast he walked with the Duchess for an hour in the garden and then rode his horse across the park to join the shooting party. He joined Sir Geoffrey, who was aiming his rifle at a rabbit in the distance. He fired, and there were 2 cries heard. One of the cry of the animal in pain, and the second a man in agony. "Good heavens!" cried Sir Geoffrey. "I hit a man." In a few moments the groundsman dragged a body away. Dorian turned in horror. It seemed that misfortune followed wherever he went. The murdered man had caught the full charge of the shot in his chest and had died instantly. No one knew who he was. They guessed that since he had a tattoo on both arms, he might be a sailor. Later, on hearing this news, Dorian jumped to his feet. He felt as if his heart had suddenly stopped beating, a terrible hope fluttering in him. "Did you say a sailor? Is there anything that would tell us his name? Where is the body? I must see it at once." "It's in an empty stable at the home farm, sir," answered one of his men. "The local people don't like to have that sort of thing in their houses. They say a corpse brings bad luck." Dorian decided to go to the stables at once. He leapt onto a horse and raced towards the farm, galloping down the long avenue as hard as he could. The trees swept past him, and wild shadows flung themselves across his path. The stones flew from beneath his horse's feet. At last he reached the home farm. He dismounted and hurried to the stable. There he paused for a moment at the door, feeling he was on the brink of an important discovery, a discovery that would either make or destroy his life. On a heap of sacking lay the dead body of a man in a coarse shirt and blue trousers. A spotted handkerchief had been placed over his face. A candle, stuck in a bottle, dripped slowly beside him. Dorian shuddered, but he removed the cloth from the battered face. The man who had been shot in the woods was James Vane. He stood there for some minutes, looking at the dead body. As he rode home, Dorian felt an enormous weight lift. He was safe at last. And we will continue this story next Friday or Saturday. Thanks for listening to Miss Retro Reads.